Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Housing Choice Grant Program Guidance webinar. My name is Mackenzie Bell, the Senior Community Grants Coordinator, and I will be presenting with Felipe Zamperlini, the Manager for the Community Assistance Unit. Felipe, do you want to start us off talking about today's agenda?
Thanks, Mackenzie, and welcome folks to the webinar. First and foremost, we're going to be talking a few items today about the Community One Stop for Growth, sharing a little bit more about what it is. Of course, you're here to learn about the Housing Choice Grant Program, so we'll give you an overview about the program. We'll discuss where the Housing Choice Grant Program fits within the One Stop, as well as some important program parameters for you to consider and how to be competitive. We'll give you a few examples of successful applications from previous application rounds and give you a little bit of guidance on how to complete the full application, as well as sharing some key dates and opportunities to get further guidance throughout the Community One Stop for Growth process. So of course, the Community One Stop for Growth is a single application portal and a collaborative process where 12 different programs from the Executive Office of Economic Development, Mass Development, and the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities come together to streamline the experience for you, the applicant, and better coordinate and deliver an important project and grant making throughout the Commonwealth. Community One Stop for Growth has had the Housing Choice Grant Program as part of it since the beginning of the program. I'll let Mackenzie and I'll give a little bit more information to you all about the program itself.
Let's dive into the Housing Choice Grant Program. Your point of contact is me. You'll see that my email is listed here, mackenzie.bell@mass.gov. The purpose of the Housing Choice Grant Program is really to be that exclusive grant program for currently designated housing choice communities. The funding is fairly broad, and we'll take a look at the development continuum in a moment, but this grant program can fund a variety of activities related to planning and zoning, site preparation for development, housing development, and infrastructure projects. Only currently designated housing choice communities, related municipal entities within a current housing choice community, and regional planning agencies with a proposed project within a current housing choice community are eligible to apply. So where does housing choice fit within the one-stop development continuum? Again, this is an exclusive grant program only for currently designated housing choice communities, and as a reward program, it's meant to be fairly broad. You'll see that eligible activities fall under the planning and zoning category of community plans, zoning revisions, planning for housing, under site preparation, under building, and under infrastructure. Let's dive into some important project parameters. If you haven't already, I strongly encourage you to take a look at our published guidelines for the grant program available on our website. That provides a lot of details about the grant program, but we'll make some highlights. We'll go over some highlights here. In terms of budgets, the maximum awards may depend on the kind of project you are considering. So projects that fall under site preparation, building, or infrastructure are limited up to $500,000 for single entities, and planning and zoning projects for single entities are limited to $150,000. Any awards over these amounts are only considered for joint or regional applications on a case-by-case basis. And while local cash match is not required, take note that applications with a local match will get bonus points during application review. Housing Choice Grant Program is a 2-year grant. So that means when we make awards later this fall, 2024, those projects will need to be completed by June 30th, 2026. Grant funds can fund a variety of activities, such as community planning and zoning revisions, feasibility, engineering, design, and construction of physical infrastructure and of existing and new buildings, as well as the long list of rehabilitation, due diligence, plan designs, market studies, pre-permitting or permitting, engineering, acquisition, demolition, and site-related upgrades of future development sites. Unfortunately, these grant funds cannot be used to reimburse for staff time or training. And take note that applicants with any locally adopted growth limitations or housing or infrastructure moratoria are ineligible. Before we look at past successful applications, we'll talk a little bit more broadly about how to be competitive within this exclusive grant program. Taking note that this is a 2-year grant program, make sure to consider whether your project is best achieved as a full project within the grant cycle or whether you want to take a phased approach. The published guidelines on our website include the scoring rubric, how these applications will be scored upon review. Take a look at that. How can you really maximize all possible points? And while scores are certainly important, they're not the only factor when determining awards. We also consider things like regional diversity, previous support from the agency, whether someone is a first-time grant recipient, and the priorities of the secretary. A competitive application will certainly be complete and answer all questions, but take note of these really important questions below. First, project need. We're looking for you to show us, not just tell us, what the need is and why that need is specific to your community. Under progress to date, please include descriptions of any implemented local ordinances or bylaws that directly impact this project. That may be very important for us to consider. Under project impacts, try to provide the best estimates for housing outcomes due to this project. We know that could be very difficult, especially depending on the kind of project being proposed, but use judgment, try to do your best estimates for those outcomes. When completing the questions to indicate which housing choice best practices you have implemented, make sure that you are backing up that best practice with evidence of implementation. We can only score what we see documented. So if a best practice is not documented with evidence, you may not receive those points. Also take note that this year's application will include the 2023 published housing choice best practices. We are in the process of updating our 2024 best practices, but they will not affect nor be used for this application round. Depending on the kind of project being proposed, we are expecting the following attachments: a consultant or contractor cost estimate, a project location map, definitely that evidence of housing choice best practices, and possibly a site plan or construction drawing.
Thanks, Mackenzie. I'll walk us through really briefly now some examples of successful applications in the past. So first and foremost, we have Brockton's in FY22. They were doing an infrastructure and streetscape and roadway improvements to help create 160 units of multifamily residential housing in the city of Brockton. So their application came in a very clearly and defined need, really talking about that local need. And again, just like Mackenzie mentioned, showing and telling, not just one or the other, especially in relation to how it supported housing development, really connecting to the housing nexus. They also had justifiable costs and a really great demonstrated readiness to implement the project. And the scope was very thorough to explain how they were going to actually complete that project to begin with in the timeline that they were proposing to implement it, keeping in mind that this is a 2-year program, or award rather. Somerville and Medford, this was a very unique Housing Choice Award. 2 Housing Choice communities coming together for our first ever joint award. This was a planning and zoning project. They were doing a zoning update to oversee some vision and revision plans for Broadway, which was an area between Ball Square and Magoon Square that shares a border with both Somerville and Medford. Of course, the city of Somerville is the actual awardee, but they are doing this in partnership with Medford to expand some of their efforts around the work that was being done for the MBTA Green Line extension. Now, this project had a very clear project need, discussing specifically that collaboration between two municipal entities with that very tangible outcomes, a very detailed scope of work, and a clear path to feasible implementation. This is key, making sure that this is implementable even beyond the grant program itself. They had a really great demonstrated commitment to date, showing that they had done a great amount of work to think about this need to begin with, and showing essentially to us that they really needed to have this comprehensive zoning study update to be able to move forward with the redevelopment needs. And in FY24, a recent award, this is also another planning and zoning award for zoning revisions to comply with MBTA Communities Law, Section 3A. This project in Methuen demonstrated a perfect readiness to really get the work started and complete within the timeline that both the grant needed, but also what the community need is. They discussed the timeline within their need and their requirement to comply with MBTA Communities Law. Had a very robust community engagement plan, and that included a clear path to implementation, which is key. Those are not necessarily one and the same items. They are two separate items. Your engagement plan is important, and your implementation plan is very important as well. Lastly, when you're actually completing the application, as you saw, it is available in several continuums throughout the application, throughout the one-stop application. The Housing Choice Grant Program is available in the plan and zoning category, the site preparation category, the building category, and the infrastructure category. But I do want to highlight one very specific category here of the one-stop, which is building and community-led housing production. This is a section that is exclusively this year through the Housing Choice Grant Program to help support housing production, help support housing rehabilitation, and help support housing preservation directly. So that's a really great tool that we have available for communities to consider to support their local housing needs. Beyond that, in addition to answering the questions within the development continuum category, you have to opt in to receive a review for the Housing Choice Grant Program. Only housing choice communities, like Mackenzie said, are eligible to mark this. And in question 2.4a, you have the ability to select yes if you would like your funding to be considered for the Housing Choice Grant Program, bearing in mind all matters pertaining to the guidelines, including maximum award requested, maximum budget for the project, the award, how much money you're asking for it to be funded here, and all other components, including that you do answer the housing choice best practice questions that are then going to open up if you say yes to this question. Now, a lot more information can be found online, both on the program website, but also on mass.gov/one-stop, where you can review more information about every single project, every single one of the 12 grant programs through the One Stop, as well as learn more about other webinars and other programs as well.
To wrap up our webinar, we will dive into the fiscal 25 round of funding timeline and some important points about where you can get further guidance. We are currently in the full application and expression of interest phase. So the full application is available, it is open. You may not submit that full application until May, but you can access it and start drafting your answers. That expression of interest is now open. Consider submitting a form to get direct feedback on your proposed project. Before the full application can be submitted, we're going to continue to provide various forms of guidance through webinars and office hours. We'll talk a bit about that on the next slide. Take note that the final deadline to submit a full application will be Wednesday, June 5th, after which program staff will begin the review and collaborative review across all of the participating programs. We anticipate announcing awards of grants later this fall in September. Opportunities for guidance. Visit online for all of these opportunities, including, again, that expression of interest form where you can get direct feedback on your project. You can review all possible webinars, generally about the One Stop, as well as for specific grant programs, and take advantage of office hours. This is a chance to chat with program staff in real time, get answers to your questions real time. The Housing Choice Grant Programs office hours will be held on Thursday, March 14th at 3 o'clock. Thanks so much for tuning in, and hopefully we will see an application from you soon.